City of Somerville and MBTA respond to hostile architecture changes, and Somerville Open Studios adapts to pandemic conditions. Welcome to this delayed Monday edition of the Weekly Wire, an audio roundup of highlights from this week's articles in the Somerville Wire news service. I'm your host, John Loftus. Find full text versions of those headlines and other Somerville Wire stories 24/7 at somervillewire.news. That's Somerville Wire, all one word, .news. Our first segment this week is about the hostile architecture that has been installed at the Davis Square T station. Steel armrests have been added to the benches for the purposes of helping people with mobility challenges, according to the MBTA. But many officials and political candidates have said that the structures actually prevent unhoused people from finding a resting place. Hostile architecture has been loosely defined as any building or structure that is designed or intended to prevent unhoused individuals from sitting or lying on the building or structure at street level. Willie Burnley Jr., a candidate for city council, explains how hostile architecture is part of a system of oppression and how it is important that the city address the larger issue of chronic homelessness.
Easily decades, I think you could go back and see little ways that cities have tried to make it so that people couldn't be here. And I think a lot of this is related to and stems from anti-loitering laws, which themselves have a pretty discriminatory history. But this is, in some ways, just a structural manifestation of a belief in a practice that says some people are undesirable, they shouldn't be in our community, and we're going to make it as hard as possible for them to be here so that they go somewhere else. It's in Medford, it's in Everett, I've seen it all around our region, outside of T stations. The question then becomes, one, how do we make that go away? Is there a way that we can legislate against it in a way that is enforceable and that also changes the physical spaces we currently have? What are we doing around the larger issue of chronic homelessness? Because it's, as I've been reminded by activists, it's not enough that we say we're going to make it easier for you to sleep out on a park bench or on the streets. We have to make it so that people actually have reasonable and decent shelter or housing that they can go to.
In our next clip, we'll hear about Somerville Open Studios, which will be running virtually in outdoor spaces on May 1st and 2nd. In previous years, SOS has been an event where visitors are able to walk through an artist's workshop or studio space, getting an inside look at how the artists create their work. Because of the pandemic, SOS has pivoted to a new format. Artist Heather Belchunas, who works for Somerville Arts Council and curates the Inside Out Gallery in Davis Square, will be featured in this year's SOS, showcasing a set of illustrations called Colorful Critters. Here, she walks us through the creative process that led to the series' development.
It is mixed media, so it starts off with watercolor, and then I take watercolor pigment and let it spread, get those splotches, and very random, and then I look at it, see what kind of animal inspires me and what it kind of looks like to me, and then I go from there. So that's usually how I work, and sometimes it's a little bit more intentional where I know what I'm going to draw, and then I'll just put the pigment on over the drawing. That's, that isn't always the case, and then I'll go into it with ink and sometimes like acrylic pens and sometimes colored pencil to be kind of going over something like that. So that's kind of like my process with that. But I did want it to be a little bit more playful and have it be a little bit more fluid rather than because sometimes illustration can be very tight. This I wanted to have a little bit more of a fluid quality to it, but you still get a lot of the detail.
The Somerville Wire and the Weekly Wire are a production of the Somerville News Garden Project at the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. Email us with tips, comments, corrections, and Somerville event and announcement listings at bingeonline.org. BINJ online.org. Have a wonderful week, Somerville.